Hi, this is Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground magazine, and my esteemed co-host Mike Gast, former vice president of communications at Kampgrounds of America, and RVTravel.com writer and contributor, and still lives in Hawaii. So we're going to give an update every week until you move from Hawaii, Mike. So,
That's going to be a while.
one of these days, I'm going to be saying he's moved to Montana
I'll
or
be
somewhere cold.
the suburbs of Moline or something like that.
So, and welcome to another edition of Woodall WCM's Outdoor Hospitality Update. And our guest, of course, this week is Jim Rogers, former CEO of Kampgrounds of America. So you used to be Mike's boss, right?
We were partners.
Partners? Okay. All right. You didn't have to yell at Mike too much, did you?
Never. He was always yelling at me.
So
it was a good relationship.
Jim, you have quite the biography. Just kind of tell us a little bit about, I guess, how you got into the campground industry.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to join you. I obviously love what you guys do, and I think that first of all, I want to salute you, Ben, and the whole team there at Woodall's Management. I've always had such high respect for what you do for the industry and educating it, keeping it aware of the trends. I think that the job that you do, and especially with the Power Breakfast, which you mentioned prior to us going on the air, you really bring it back home to sort of the RV hometown of the USA, and you get people there that normally maybe wouldn't go to Louisville or participate in some of these things. So congratulations to you and Sherman, Greg, Rick, Gary, and the whole RV business and the Woodall's campground management team. I would tell you, even as a retired, campground guy, that I benefit from, again, the services that you provide with your duties. And look at what have I been up to 50 years ago. 1972, I arrived in Billings, Montana with a new bride, and it was a $700 a month management trainee for a guy named Daryl Booth, who was president of KOA at the time.
Yeah.
And as I look back 50 years, holy smokes, that seems like forever, right? Anybody that's around for 50 years, but it really launched a hospitality career for me. As it evolved, I left KOA, went back to business school, and then eventually worked my way into Harrah's casinos. And that was sort of going to the top of the pile of hospitality. I actually worked for Donald Trump. I was the go-between between Harrah's and Donald Trump in our project in Atlantic City, Harrah's at Trump Plaza. Came back to Reno, and I spent about 18 years with Harrah's. But then, out of the blue, I get a call from friends at KOA that Art Peterson, the president, stepping down. Would I be interested? So in 2000, I went back to KOA, and again, it's interesting because to take the sophistication of casino hotel hospitality and try to go back to campground, world, tremendous transition. My LinkedIn says I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I really like to work on programs to get kids outdoors. I'm still very active in the Boy Scouts of America, both locally and nationally. I'm on the board of one of the largest concessionaires of public campgrounds in the United States. And I continue to do what I can to support care camps in those 140 locations around the United States to take care of kids with cancer and their families each summer. So I'm trying to stay engaged.
Well, Jennifer Mercer from Care Camps actually said hello to you, both Jim and Mike here. So I spoke with her earlier during the Canadian Camping and RV Council conference they have going on right now. That's a virtual conference, so she was there as well. We got to hear from Larry Brownfield, so he was the keynote speaker. So very interesting. So I guess, Mike, I know you had a bunch of questions, so I'll just let you ask away.
Well, the industry has certainly changed even since Jim left KOA. It's completely turned on its ear the last couple of years, and I thought it might be interesting to get Jim's insights on from his perspective now, I know he stays very close to the industry. What's how much has it changed? And do you think it's we could ever go back to the way camping was?
I don't think camping's changed much. I mean, the experience, they're still cooking s'mores and hot dogs and hamburgers. And, we maybe doing it in different environments. And I think what's really important to this audience today is that we have so many first timers. The idea that you never get a second chance to make a first impression is really an important message to both the RV industry as well as the campground industry. And I think if you go back to some of the facts that KOA shares so kindly every year, it's like 28% of all campers last year were first timers, and that's up from 4%. So I mean, this is a huge surge. Maybe COVID driven, maybe people wanting to get outdoors was sort of the vaccine that everybody could access, and it was available and free, and so I just think it's really incumbent upon the campground RV business to be aware of this, and it takes a different type of behavior. Those of you that have that sell RVs, manufacture RVs, or those of you in the campground world, you get sick and tired of saying the same thing. I mean, new people come up to think of the last time you were first time somewhere. You don't know anything, and so I mean, people drive up the driveway. If you go to the campground experience, they want to know where the bathroom is. They want to know where their site is. You're tired maybe of doing that, but you and your staff have got to be able to repeat yourself over and over and over again and do it in a very complimentary way, to help them. And then I think that because they're new, I mean, when I pulled out of my first Cruise America RV dealership in Columbus, Ohio, when I rented my first RV, I pulled out and all the drawers fell out. I mean, I made a sharp turn, and every single utensil that I had in the rig was on the floor. You're sort of going, well, do I pull over? Do I get them? And that was before they put the catches on the drawers. But the point is there are a lot of what do I experience as a first timer. And again, I think in a campground environment, the hospitality component can help better understand the rig. That I always go back to the example that a bellman did at Harrah, is taking you to your room, explaining the air conditioning, the TV set, how to open the drapes, and is there anything else I can do for you? And I think that the campground owners and their staff that guide their guests to their sites, they need to be a little more sensitive to the first timer. They may need help, with hooking up, and what are all those buttons that I've got inside? So I just think there needs to be a high sensitivity in the next couple of years to really nurture this unbelievable tsunami of new campers that will benefit us for years.
So, Jim, you brought a lot of sophistication, I think, to the industry with the data. I mean, you started our North American Camper Report and helped analyze that and put that together for every year, and we did share that with the industry. But back in our day, there was mostly mom and pops. There were small campgrounds that we were dealing with. The level of sophistication of the investor that's coming in now is very high, and yet they're new to the industry. So how does that fit together? How does a company that may have made their fortunes elsewhere, whether it's in the hospitality hotel industry or it's in something as unique as storage facilities, all of a sudden jump into camping and become campground owner and operators? How does that change the experience?
Yeah.
Look, I think that a perfect example is I was the president and general manager of Harrah's Reno. I had 2,000 employees. I was an employee, and it was a Holiday Inn that owned us. Big corporate environment. I think that is where we're seeing the campground industry evolve. That no longer is it mom and pop at the front desk; it's an employee at the front desk. And that requires a different type of management. It's essential that in these environments that you're indeed, whether it's your hiring process or your training process, that you're trying to, cultivate people that have that sensitivity that an owner has. This is a good analogy. When I was at Harrah's, I tried to get employees to act like owners. When I went to KOA, I had owners, and all I had to do was educate them, incent them, train them, get them their service soul. They already had their pride, and so in today's environment, as you see more REITs and corporate investors, I think it's essential that they have a sensitivity to who is running that place. Mike, you'll remember this fact, but then it was a revelation to me. It was an epiphany for me. Okay, I'm running Harrah's Reno. We're spending millions of dollars in service training for employees across the Harrah's brand. I mean, literally, people pledged to excellence. In Atlantic City, we were actually the better people place. But I could never get higher guest satisfaction scores than the casino up the street, the El Dorado. And it just drove me crazy. It wasn't until I got to KOA and we did some of the research that Mike's referring to, and we learned that if indeed a camper guest met the owner, there was a 16-point bump in overall satisfaction. In my 50 years of hospitality management, I've never seen anything that has that kind of impact upon satisfaction. And the epiphany was the El Dorado was a family-owned casino. The boys, the El Dorado boys, the Carranos, were on the gaming floor, all their marketing, and showed the chef and Don Carrano pouring wine. I, as an employee, couldn't do that. So the point of all that is you've got to get your employees, if you're in a corporate environment, Holiday Inn, Harrah's, I'm the employee, I go down to the floor, I meet the guest. You've got to really build some sensitivity and the ability to treat that guest in a very special way. Technology, good training, and then again, owners see things that others don't. Owners aren't spectators, they take action. If you can get your employees to have that sort of that sense and the trust in the culture, you'll take good care of those customers. And I think that it's a blend. To your point, Mike, I just think these new owners have to have a sensitivity to what they're going to have to do to help those work campers and full-time staffers.
So there's a lot of frustration out there on the camper side with the ability just to even find a campsite to use once they got their new thing. And it was something we never had to deal with at KOA. A lot was new construction. It just wasn't done, back 10 or 15 years ago. Now there's new construction campgrounds popping up all over the place, but it's going to take a while before the inventory of sites comes anywhere close to matching the demand, if the demand stays where it's at. Do you think that campers are going to have the patience to wait and deal with this new reality of booking planning their summer, a year or a year and a half or 2 years even in advance?
This is especially true at national parks, popular state parks. I think the frustration that they're seeing is that they're not keeping up in their development. Obviously there've been a number of bills passed recently that are trying to upgrade those facilities. But the point being is the reservation system, I think, requires 6 months, sometimes a year in advance. So to your point, the customer that used to just sort of show up, it shows up in the parks full. I think there are 140 national parks or monuments around the country. The problem is 5 of them are the most popular, and we're not marketing or talking about the others, let alone are we providing facilities there that might help dilute some of that. In the private sector, that's the really exciting news, that you're building new facilities. I would say that when I was at KOA, the frustration, I think, was from the RV manufacturers wondering, if there were going to be enough inventory for all the rigs they were selling, and that sort of was a frustrating, consideration. My sense is, and again, from the casino hotel business, hospitality business, is the biggest mistake we would make is say we were full, because we never were. In my environment, the casino business, your executive hosts are always keeping rooms for that last minute guest, that good customer. And so we never run 100% occupancy. We run 95. And I think the point that you're making is one that if we read about, and again, I just read the USA Today, article about the people complaining about their rigs, and the
Yep.
publicity out there that they think that's an interesting story. That's 1 or 2%, but the perception is the place is full or the rig's going to break. And we have to do a better job as the industry to point out the fact that here are options for you to think about. If we are full, think about a different date. If we are full, think about a different location. And we don't do enough of that. When our hotel was full, we referred them to Tahoe. When the showroom was full, we referred them to the Cabaret, or a different date. And I think that, again, that's part of what technology has to do for sophisticated hospitality, managers today.
Yeah, I mean, the technology has gotten better. It's amazing how many campground owners still rely on some older technology, but I think I think overall the technology is getting there, and we are seeing more like OTAs pop into the industry, different things like that. So I guess that creates more outreach.
Well, another thing I think is important is that you have to realize that quite often the expectation isn't set at the RV dealer or at the campground. It's set at the hotel I stayed at last week, or the car dealer I went to buy my new car. So, where I bought it online and it arrived in my front driveway. The point is expectations for America's potential guests or existing campers are being set elsewhere. And so if you have an expectation, and congratulations to KOA. I mean, I'm one of these guys that leads 4 or 5 RV trips around with friends from Reno, and I had to go into each KOA to make a reservation, Well, now I can go online and begin to build that series of my trip, and with one swoop. Wow, thank you very much. So I think, to your point, if we were to look at, I always encourage some of the KOA managers, the yogi managers, they should go to Las Vegas and attend a seminar on guest loyalty technology, because we ought to learn. I went to Australia to try to find this out. I went to try to find something that was where else in the world are they doing great hospitality in the outdoor world, and obviously they were cutting edge down there. But the point is we can't sit in our own world. We need to look outside our environment and find out other hospitality leaders and are there applications. Obviously, they're not going to match up but there are applications there that we need to be thinking about, because last week our guest was attending Garth Brooks at the Four Seasons in Las Vegas, and the expectation is going to be more like that than where we stayed or where we went when we were a Boy Scout.
Yeah, definitely. I guess what does I mean, some of that is, I mean, some of it too, it has to do with employees. I know we've been having some employee issues in the industry. I guess, and having that top level service does require maybe a few more employees. I guess, what are your thoughts on that? I guess doing more with less.
And the employee recruitment, what you have to appreciate is that employees are volunteers, okay? They come. I would have 2,000 employees that are coming to my property at Harrah's, and every day some of them had kicked their dog in the morning and argued with their spouse. I don't want them in the property. Okay, if you're not coming into work with the attitude that you're going to try to exceed the guest expectation, do your job properly, support your fellow employee, I don't want you there. So imagine the selection process at a campground where the staffs are relatively small. We are benefiting from the work camper. I think the work camper component adds a tremendous amount of stability. I would go out and work camp when I was at KOA. I, met many work campers. I love them to death because I think that they, offer a maturity to what often is a younger staffer, or they bring in expertise. I remember a guy that I worked with down in Colorado Springs who had owned air conditioning, electric, service out of Plano, Texas, or something. What he could do on a site to repair an electrical outlet and have a local teenager from Colorado Springs that was on the staff to learn was unbelievable. So I think the work camper component probably needs a little bit more help and attention. They're getting a little concerned about, is this fun anymore? And then the acquisition or new people that we're looking for. look at, there's so many more people that are in RVs that don't even know about the work camper program, and would love the opportunity to be able to, do what exact work the work campers that do find it to their liking. It's a one for the retired, healthy, whatever I am. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful way to see the country, and I think that we need to support that continued evolution of finding people that have the expertise. I think, again, KOA's done a nice job of that, because they can move people from place to place, and you pull in the front door, and they already know the technology, because the technology every KOA would be the same. But if we position it right, I think we shouldn't really struggle with finding good folks. I think we should be able to offer a lifestyle that McDonald's and Target don't.
So, what do you think about operations like boondocking is getting more sophisticated? That they've got organizations now that are putting the software that puts the person that's got a free site in their backyard together with somebody that's looking for one. Harvest Host is another. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those, but where businesses are giving up a spot or two in their parking lot for overnight parking, as long as folks come in and they buy their wine or they golf around, whatever that is. Is that bleeding away from what camping really is, or is it just another option?
Look, and I think it's intriguing. To me, it's kind of like the glamping segment. I mean, the media loves this stuff. They love to see the guy, that set up his barbecue and put out his lounge chair in the Walmart parking lot. I think that the smaller segments are just an example of trying to meet the desires of people that own an RV. They're going to go visit the wine country. There are more RVs than the population. I want to use it, and oh, I did outdoorsy. I mean, you talk about capitalizing upon rigs, taking outdoorsy, and all of a sudden it was being used for 3 weeks. Now it's being used for 3 months. I mean, so the equipment, it has a greater presence, so it's going to show up in those kinds of locations. But the masses are going to end up, in the RV parks, in the campgrounds, because they're families. They're looking for the engagement. Remember the thing we used to talk about? It's the last small town in America. I mean, they love the safety. They love the idea that they can walk down the little walk, and all of a sudden they're looking at a license plate and it says "Go Auburn" or "Go Huskies" or whatever. And there's this relationship that they don't have at home or in society, and even more so with COVID, where we just sort of busted up all the social engagement. So RVing becomes even more important as this oasis of social engagement that just brings tremendous joy. And the camper goes home and, what the heck was that? Like, I want to do that again. That was really cool. I got to meet some people. And so I think there's that component that the campground offers that the boondocking or and look at, I mean, the opportunities for these people, I'd rather have them in a location that's not just undefined. I'd rather have them at a winery with a hookup and, a parking lot of some kind than just on the side of the road. And, I guess that's up for those various businesses to figure out whether they can appeal to them.
So that brings up another thought. Do you think campgrounds in general, plus camping and campers, have a real identity crisis? Because now we're seeing a lot of pushback from neighborhoods when new construction gets proposed. Somebody wants to bring an RV park in, and the neighbors say, "Nope, we don't want that element in our neighborhood." And it's being fed, I think, by the rolling homeless, the folks that can scrape together $500 or $1,000 after they've lost their home, and they're living on the streets, especially along the West Coast. They're finding these RVs that may or may not even be mobile and parking them in residential neighborhoods or along busy streets, and that's what people see, and they equate that with, we don't want that in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, look, I don't know. I think it's a way to find low cost housing. If you can pick up an RV, heck, in Reno, what we do is we pick up the Burning Man RVs. They're all covered with sand. Somebody cleans it out and rents them the rest of the year. But no, I think because you have a higher population of RVs, you just have a presence. They're going to get used for lots of crazy things, and they're going to be in the wrong place, and they're going to be used for. And it's just going to come down to the regulations, appropriate use being encouraged. But the key here is don't don't want to turn our campground inventory into low income housing. We want to sustain that as a leisure time, whether it's the seniors long-term stay in the South or it's the traveling public in most of those, transient and holiday kinds of places that they spend the weekend or a short stay. But again, I think what you're talking about in all these cases, boondocking, the ugly looking RV down the street is a very small percent of what's actually going on out there, and we just need. That's why I think the Go RVing campaign and the other elements. I mean, you can't not see an Airstream in a commercial. It's whether it's a Chevrolet commercial or a beer commercial. They always position the Airstream as pretty wow, and we want to continue to give that image.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing how many younger people have really taken on to this. And I mean, the vintage units that are out there, even the vintage units now are in really good shape. So, I mean, it's few and far between when you see a campground that's kind of just filled with ugly looking trailers. I mean, everybody has really nice units they're traveling around in.
Well, I go back to the first timers. I look at the good news in the first timers is not just first timers, they're diverse. You're seeing people that we haven't seen before, in our general population, and we're seeing families. And I'd be remiss if I didn't at least look. I think that I found that scouting, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, YMCA, Indian Guides, you name it. To your point, Ben, about youth, I really think that we've got to continue to foster those programs because those are our future campers. When I was at KOA, some of the research we did would say over 50 to 60% of our campers first went camping as a scout, or with their dad. Either went to scouting or with the dad, and the dad had been a scout, or the mom. So I think it's important that we continue to think about that. And just to make the point, Boy Scout camps are struggling. So there's a tremendous effort in the country to create Boy Scout family adventure camps. So imagine going to your old Boy Scout camp with your family, and guess what? You're going to do things you don't do at a KOA or at a Yogi. You're going to be talking about bows and arrows. You're going to be talking about BB guns. You're going to talk about, scaling rocks. You're going to be doing things that Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts have done for years, and now the family's going to do it. And so I think that kind of environment, in fact, that what we call the high adventure bases, Boy Scouts of America have these incredible locations at Philmont, Sea Base, the Summit in West Virginia, and up in the northern tier up in Wisconsin, Minnesota, canoe base. They put 50,000 kids through these things in a year. I mean, this is amazing, but we need to help the local councils and build that business as well, because I think we look at, see what's coming, but I always am trying to think a little in the 5-10 years, if those programs that Scouting's members haven't continued or participated in successful camps, we may not see the camper evolution that we would seek. And I think that it's important as the sort of strategic view here that we be thinking beyond tomorrow or next year and how many rigs we're going to sell or how many campgrounds we're going to. We need to think about how we're going to drive campers.
Yeah, definitely.
So I know that during your time at KOA, Jim, you were an RV owner, and that I won't name any names, but that wasn't always the most pleasant of experiences. So what advice would you give to RV manufacturers as they jack up their production to the point of over 600,000 rigs? They dropped it back a little bit the last time I saw. I think they're not going to say 600,000 anymore, but darn close. And these are the same plants that were putting out 400,000. And they're undergoing the same labor issues and everything else. And there's a lot of dissatisfaction amongst RV buyers, or a lot of uncertainty, at least, about the quality of what they're getting. And so what advice would you give to an RV manufacturer in this climate today?
Well, look at I had a wonderful. We don't regret our time with RV. I would tell you that we were disappointed in our launch. You wouldn't. We always thought there should be like a pilot checklist that would come with the RV, and we didn't get one. It would have been tremendously helpful to, sort of have that prepared. It seems fairly simple. The other thing I found surprising is when I asked the salespeople whether they'd ever been in the RV or used it, I got a big no. So I think number one is they need to help us prepare our rig the same way. That first time I was amazed at how, as we traveled, the tips that we got on, how to put something up in your dashboard to kind of line it up with the white line on the side of the road to keep your rig in the middle of the lane. We learned that from a trucker. So a checklist, practical experience, and then they really have to spend time with the current user. And I think encourage the industry. This goes back to Ben and Sherman and the gang, is that cooperation, that the campground is anticipating the new user and helping minimize the questions or being prepared. I always suggested to the RV dealer they ought to send the RV and the new customer out to the local campground and have sort of a trial run or a break-in or something. You may put your salesperson out there to help them kind of use it close to home. I just think that you until you use it and are familiar with it and get comfortable with it, you don't want to drive it 150 miles to some unknown place. So I think there are things that seem fairly simple and not of high cost that can continue to help that transition into a new rig and making the most of it. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think the industry has done some of that. I know, Mike, when we spoke with the two RV people we had on last fall, they had mentioned some of that. I know I've spoken with campground owners that have taken the initiative to work with local dealerships and become kind of like what you mentioned, Jim, that campground where they go first, and then if they have any issues, they're located right there. And
the Smallies have done just an incredible job of building the most indestructible RV out there. So renting an RV, whether it's outdoorsy or an RV or El Monte or whatever it is, I think using that and learning a little bit more about a vehicle, doesn't have to be the one you actually end up buying, but it gives you the experience of what it feels like driving that length of vehicle and parking it is a good test drive. Okay, but that again, we ought to market it that way. Hey, test drive an RV. Here it is. Go for it, and then come back and pick one you want.
You mean I can't drive a 38-foot motorhome and weave in and out of traffic? That's not going to work?
Hey, we ended up at 72 feet because we towed a car behind us, and we couldn't see the car because it was too small. We never knew whether we had it back there or not.
The RVs are getting so long now that if you have a really bad fog day, you can't see the end of your RV. So
So another good question, a little bit more timely, probably, with what's going on in the world today. Everybody back in the mainland where you guys live are worried about $5 a gallon gas. Out here in Hawaii, we look in our rearview mirror fondly and think, God, wouldn't $5 gas be great? But what does that rapid increase in fuel costs do to this lifestyle? I mean, is this something? I know, Jim, we used to market pretty strongly to camping closer to home because that's what people were doing due to time constraints. But now it's being driven by cost too. So do you see a collapsing back into those less than 50-mile trips to go camping?
Yeah, the staycation. I was there in the 70s at KOA when we went through the oil embargo, and we try to come up with all kinds of ways to use it. I think the other thing that happens is people decide to leave their rigs at the campground, and drive the car out to the campground. So I think that intercontinental travel may be reduced this summer because of the cost of that. Staying closer to home will increase. But I think if you have an RV, that's a pretty significant investment. I think you're going to use it. You may use it as your new office. I mean, obviously people that are working from home are converting their RVs into pretty nice places to work out of. But I think the RV industry is in a good place. Obviously, they're trying to figure out ways to make more efficient vehicles and things. And I think the behavior of the new camper, maybe of the kind of on the edge camper, may change due to the cost of fuel. And I may not drive from Ohio to Yellowstone, but I will go out and use it in the region that where I live.
So is anybody in the Rogers clan driving an electric vehicle yet?
Yeah, look, we're in Tesla world. We are Reno is where all the Tesla batteries are made. So I've got both boys driving Teslas, and but they haven't convinced me yet. But eventually they will, and I think that's a possibility. It seems pretty effective.
Well, it's a pretty hot topic in the RV business, I know too. They're all trying to figure that out. And what does a 40-foot Class A look like being pushed around by batteries?
Yeah, no question. Look, and I know we're running out of time. I think it's really important to everyone that we're able to visit with, that there continues to be this message that in the race for excellence there is no finish line. There's this sense, I think, that you build a good RV, you get an award from RV Business, you're a dealer, and you get your Dealer of the Year awards. We can't stop. We are in an industry that is moving every day. It's extremely dynamic, and I think that we have to continue to find new ways to do what we do, better ways, staying in touch with the owner, the camper, the operator, and everyone needs to feel like we're contributing to moving that bar, because the expectations. When I got there in 2000, the expectations were relatively low when you pulled into a campground. We've been raising them, whether it's the accommodation, the quality of the rig, the hot tub, the bigger Olympic pool, the barbecue, the music, the horseback ride. We're raising them. Great. But you know what? We have to sustain that and continue to add to it. And it requires investment. It also requires, just being sure that you are doing the best you can, whether you're cleaning campgrounds or whether you're selling an RV or servicing an RV. All those elements, the guest or the camper, the owner, doesn't see us as different. They see us as a continuity of experience. And so even though I'm starting out buying it at whatever dealer, when I move to my campground or I move to my national park, they sort of see that as all the same. And I think we need to continue to be sensitive to that as we try to build partnerships and share this. And like obviously, ultimately, you have to ask the guest, the owner, how we're doing, and share that result.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just always amazed at how much the industry's grown. Just COVID's really accelerated a lot of different things, and it's just amazing how far we've come. And hopefully, the industry can maintain it and give the campers that are coming in a great experiences. So millions of new campers. So very exciting.
Hey, before we sign off, I wanted to give Care Camps a plug too. That obviously started with KOA, and Jim mentioned it earlier. But Jennifer Mercer, who runs the show now at Care Camps, is hung with us today. So I wanted to give Care Camps a plug too, because that's a charity near and dear to both Jim and I, and it's just a great. Again, these aren't at KOA campgrounds. They aren't at commercial campgrounds. These are standalone camps that are set up with medical professionals, so that these kids that are going through cancer, their siblings, their families can experience that summer camp feeling while they're going through treatment or while they're in recovery. And so it's just the best charity ever. And we've been involved. It's got deep ties to not just KOA, but everybody else in the industry. There's a lot of big manufacturing companies involved now, and aftermarket
we have an interesting Reno story. A gentleman in Reno would just participate in the transatlantic row. So he spent 70 days rowing from Africa to the Caribbean in a rowboat by himself. And his cause was the Kaizu campground or camp in California that burned down in one of those fires a couple years ago. But that's a care camp. So, I mean, there are people all over the world that are keeping an eye on those care camps and the kids and the families that are dealing with cancer, which is just the outdoors, getting some time to to be as a family and to be with other people just like you, which is what those care camps do, are just absolutely precious. And we're just so happy that the industry, the entire, again, one of those things that we're doing together is can be a national and industry charity for us.
Yeah, and Jennifer messaged us again, thanking you guys for your incredible support. And it's a great charity, and I know we have a couple camps near us, and it's just great to be able to see the support that the industry gives to them. So
Hey, we made Sherman Goldenberg cry at convention one year when he was there hearing about it. So
yeah,
I know it touches hearts. Sherman's
yeah.
got one in there somewhere.
In the raincoat.
Yeah.
But anyways, well, thanks, Jim, for joining us, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule and for giving us an update on what you've been doing and just your thoughts on the industry. So,
thank you. You guys keep up the great work, and I know sometimes you don't get that much feedback, but I as an observer for many years now, our industry has moved ahead much faster. The learning curves have been faster as a result of the work that you do, and thank you for that.
well, thank you very much, and thanks everyone for watching, and hope everyone has a great rest of the week.
Go camping.